Well, the filing period for candidates for Arkansas office opened on Thursday, February 22nd. It goes through March 1st. Some people are first-time filers. Some people have filed for about the 50th time, it seems, in office. Our next guest, Congressman Steve Womack, has filed somewhere in between.
Not 50.
Somewhere in between. First time and 50 there. Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us.
Roby, it's always good to be with you.
Let's talk about it. You've got a potential Republican challenger this year. You've definitely got a Democratic challenger. He filed on Thursday. There's going to be a Libertarian candidate. With what's all out there in the voting electorate right now, you've just got a lot of discontent. Do you think this is going to be the toughest race that you've run since the first time you ran?
I'm philosophical about races. Look, if you're passionate about how you feel, and if you think you can make a difference, you should run. I mean, this is what makes America great, is that we have an election process that's open to everybody that qualifies. And so I'm not at all concerned about other people running. Once the filing is over, then it's about making your case. And I believe, and I'm absolutely confident, I will be able to make a case to the people, the discerning voter of the 3rd District of Arkansas, that I'm the best of the field. And if I can't make that case, then somebody else will succeed me. But so I'm pretty philosophical about those things.
All right. Let's talk about your role as House Budget Chairman. There was some news that came out on Friday morning that you were actually going to be part of a bicameral, bipartisan committee in Congress that is going to look at reforming the budget process as well as the appropriations process, which you are on that committee as well. What do you think that commission, that group needs to accomplish?
Well, we have to fix a broken process. Our blueprint for budgets and appropriations is the 1974 Budget Act, and I know you're familiar with it. It has been amended a few times, tweaked here and there. It just doesn't work. Think about this. I've been in Congress now in my 8th year. I've been an appropriator since day one. We have still yet to complete the appropriations process through regular order in the time that I've been there. And here's what's more about that. The majority of the members of the House of Representatives have come in either in my class or since then. They think normal is a continuing resolution.
Yeah.
That's not the way it's designed. So to answer your question, Roby, this committee, bicameral, bipartisan, 4 House Republicans, 4 House Democrats, 4 Senate Republicans, 4 Senate Democrats will have to meet, listen to ideas from the breadth of our constituencies, and try to come up with a process that can actually work. Now, there's a couple of components to it that I think are important. Number one is I think there has to be a consequence for not doing your job. And we don't have that right now.
So you said there needs to be a penalty.
Absolutely.
So what is it? Is it not getting paid?
Well, you know, we tried the gimmick of no budget, no pay. That is one approach. But I just think there has to be some outcome for inaction. And I'm not even going to begin to try to say what that is. Now, I've had
some people would suggest it would be getting thrown out of office if you can't pass a budget.
Well, let's don't go too extreme just yet. But you know, really, the process is broken. It's not working for the American people. We don't do budgets. We don't do appropriations on schedule. We run from CR to CR. We threaten government shutdowns. The markets get herky-jerky over that kind of stuff. And just people are, it feeds the cynicism of government. Roby, if you can't do the most fundamental of your things, and I would argue budget and appropriations is pretty fundamental. It's the blocking and tackling of government. If you can't do that, how can you do immigration? How can you do pension reform? How can you do some of the other things that are really, really consequential to the American public?
All right, so we'll keep our eye on that committee and what it does, that commission and what it does. But let's talk about what you're dealing with right now in terms of reality. The president has presented his budget. By all accounts, conservative or liberal-leaning think tanks would suggest that even over the next 10 years, we're not going to have a balanced budget as a result of this. We're going to have some exploding deficits and debt. How long is it going to take to balance the budget?
You know, we're kind of fixated on trying to get to balance in a 10-year window. The longer you go without doing reforms to the principal drivers of deficits and debt, the more draconian those solutions are and the longer it takes to get to achievable balance. I think we're into a new era now, Roby, where instead of getting to a balanced budget, we get to a budget where the deficit is measured as a percentage of GDP, which is really not a good thing. But yeah, the president's budget never balances, and we are going to have to look at mechanisms by which we can do some reforms that can change the long-term growth spirals, healthcare being number one, and the fact that we're putting a lot more people into the Medicare program, so it is growing by itself and it will eventually be the biggest program the federal government has. So how do you make those programs sustainable for time and at the same time bend those cost curves in the out year? But direct answer to your question, can we get to a 10-year balance? It's probably not a real, I'm not real optimistic that we can. Without really doing some things that'll probably never see the light of day in the Senate. But this is something the budget reform process, Select Committee will deal with. Do we want to look at a 10-year window or do we want to look at a 20-year window? Just what do we want to do in terms of figuring out how to get to some measure of achievable balance in the out years, and I don't know what that number will be.
When you were named House Budget Chairman, you said that you were going to solicit your colleagues for ideas. That was going to be something that was going to be important to you, is to try to gain input from some of your colleagues, Republican and Democrat. What have you been talking to them about, and what ideas do you think you're seeing as some potential ones that you may throw out?
I have my own ideas about things that we should do in a real budget reform process. Now that the Select Committee has been named, I want to be very careful that I don't get too far ahead of that out of deference to whomever is going to be chairing the committee. But we have opened a portal on the House Budget Committee website so that our members can input. We always have a member day, so members with ideas can come in and make their presentation to the House Budget Committee on what they think we should be doing. We will do similar things with the Select Committee. I think it's even possible we could do a field hearing out there and let America weigh in. So the portal is one way that people can feed input into the House Budget Committee. And then, of course, we have other opportunities for outside groups like Committee for a Responsible Budget, Americans for Tax Reform, Club for Growth, Americans for Prosperity. We will reach out to these, and I have, reach out to these outside groups that delve into these areas and solicit their input. And then the other thing, Roby, I want to be clear to tell you is that one of the first things I did upon receiving the gavel is I went to John Yarmouth's office from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. He's my ranking member. And I sat down with John and I said, I can't do my job if I don't have an open and frank discussion with my ranking member. And so we have agreed to work together to kind of maybe check a little bit of our politics at the door coming in and pledge to work together to see if we can get something that is in a bipartisan fashion, because I think that's going to be the true secret to success.
Does this get to what Rand Paul was talking about when he went on his Senate floor tirade there of, you know, Republicans complained about deficits and the debt under Obama, yet here we are adding more to the deficit and more to the debt. This is rank hypocrisy, is basically what he said.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a little bit of truth in that. In fact, there may be a lot of truth in that. Sometimes we are against something until we are for it. We dislike something until we love it. And I can give you a couple of examples. People on my side of the aisle going into the 2016 election were railing against the Electoral College until it worked.
Right.
So you didn't like it until you loved it. And the 60-vote filibuster in the Senate, our side of the aisle rails against the 60-vote threshold until you're in the minority, then you love it.
That's right.
So I think what Rand was trying to say is it's a matter of your perspective. When you're the party in power, there are certain things you're going to like, the same things that you will hate when you're in the minority. We have to break that down. There are reasons we have those rules and the reasons we have those particular protocols. We've got to be careful that we're consistent in our positions on it.
I know you're being careful in what you may throw out there in terms of ideas because of this this group, this bipartisan group that's going to come together. But entitlement reforms, tax hikes, are these things that will have to be discussed?
Let me be careful.
Okay.
This select committee is not designed to determine how to fix the deficit and the debt.
It's to determine how to fix the process.
Its purpose, sole purpose, is to rewrite the 1974 Budget Act and make the budget and appropriations process work in the contemporary political environment.
So as you do put a budget together for this fiscal year, how are you going to get things in balance?
If we do. Now I have to be clear. The tea leaves I'm reading from the Senate is they're not doing a budget. You know, we've already set the top line numbers, what we in the budget world call the 302As. Those numbers have been set for the rest of 18 and all of 19. That's an outcome of a budget process, but we've already set those, you know, based on that budget agreement. So there is less of an emergency on doing a budget resolution because you've already got your top line numbers for discretionary spending. The only thing that we haven't been able to do, at least, and we've been off this week, is whether or not those 302A numbers, that top line spending number, has been apportioned down to the 12 appropriations bills. Those are the 302Bs. I don't know if that's been done yet, and that's what's keeping the appropriators from finishing the appropriations bills, because we're on the clock now, except for defense. We're on the clock for all the other spending on the discretionary side till late March. And so we got about 3 weeks to go, and that's going to take a while for the appropriators to write those bills.
Yeah. I know you're obviously a huge supporter of our military, and you've got that background as well, and there is a huge increase in spending for the military. But there was an Inspector General report last year that said as much as 20% of the Pentagon was caught up in some waste and wasteful.
Well, it's under an audit.
There. So why give them more money when you're not satisfied, or there are questions about what they're spending with a fifth of their budget?
Well, you have two different issues going on there, and the Pentagon is currently under an audit. And Secretary Mattis, who I have an extreme amount of confidence in, I think he is potentially the best SecDef we've had in a long, long time, if ever. But he's going to make that Pentagon, that five-sided building is going to be accountable on his watch. But the way Pentagon spending works, Roby, is that so much of it is in the acquisitions arena, where you're buying aircraft carriers and F-35 aircraft and those kinds of things. And that's not something that you budget today, you spend today, and then you go back and budget again the next year. These are multi-year projects that might even span a generation. And so you've got to make commitments early on to give the defense industry an opportunity to commit to building some of this stuff. So Pentagon spending is handled differently. Kay Granger, my colleague on approps, who runs defense, and I'm on her subcommittee, has recently come out with a request to be able to extend some of the initial spending in the Pentagon, because it won't effectively be spent in this fiscal year between now and September 30th, which I think is a wise move on her part. We just don't want a use it or lose it mentality in the Pentagon, because that's what leads to the waste and abuse of the tax dollar.
All right. Let's turn our attention to guns. We've seen the tragedy in Florida at Parkland this past really week to 10 days. It has, I think, really overtaken the national dialogue in a lot of ways. Some people say that this event is different than previous events. Is that your sense, that we're going to see some different outcome as a result of this tragedy?
I think it's true that it's a different event than other events, but all events are different in some form or fashion. This particular event, horrific in its nature, was different in that there were red flags up already on this Cruz character. In fact, when you hear kids in the aftermath of the shooting say that they had predicted that if there's ever going to be a school shooting at this school, it would be this guy. The postings on social media, the threats, the outright threats he was making, bragging about wanting to achieve something related to like a school shooting, those kinds of things have to be dealt with in this environment that we're in. You can't ignore those. And so from the school board to the local law enforcement to the federal officials, there has to be some continuity of discovery in what is actually going on there that could lead and could trigger some kind of a mental health examination that might lead to the prevention of him owning or possessing a weapon. Now, all this is hindsight, and it's good. It's real easy to armchair quarterback this thing. I'm pleased now that the President has come out and suggested that we start looking at some things that are in the arena that have kind of been hands-off over time, raising ages on, you know, buying assault weapons, the bump stock issue. You know, I totally support doing something about bump stocks because it is a device on a semi-automatic weapon that makes it unreliable.
Right.
Anybody who's a shooter like I am, a hunter, anybody that believes in the shooting sports should never want to put something or agree that it's good to have something on your weapon that makes it less reliable. So I think that's good. Background checks, been a little concerned about those in the past because then we get on a slippery slope of letting some government bureaucracy somewhere try to determine who can or cannot own firearms, and I think that's got to be really tightly controlled and looked at.
Path for you to support that.
But absolutely, look, it's on the table.
Yeah.
We have to have a conversation as a country like that, and that doesn't mean that we are that we are turning our back on the Second Amendment. That would be the furthest thing from my mind. We just need to be responsible people, I think.
You mentioned raising the age to 21 to buy, I guess, a rifle or an assault weapon of some sort. Do you support that?
Well, you know, I want to look at it a little deeper. I want to see if they, you know, can you put an age? Can you make something? I mean, we do this with consumption of alcohol, but can you just say? If you don't buy it till you're this age, I mean, there are really mature 18-year-olds and there are really immature 21-year-olds. Sure. That's a difficult issue to kind of look at. I think it would, for a lot of people, it would give them some peace of mind that we're doing something, but are you really answering the bell? And look, America's got a heart problem right now. Well, what's in the heart of people who become so determined to carry out a senseless act like shooting innocent people? The depth of their depression or their despair that would cause them to be predisposed to doing something like that is a lot deeper than just passing some laws about can you own this or what age should you have this. It goes right to the heart. So we got mental health issues, we got opioid issues and other illicit drug issues. We got a lot of external factors contributing to this situation. We've got to look at it holistically. One
other thing that the President's thrown out there I want to get your take on is he's talked about basically concealed carry for teachers or personnel at some of these school facilities. Some people say it's a terrible idea. Some people say it could curtail the situations like what we saw. What do you think?
Well, again, you got to be really careful that you don't make a decision today that causes second and third order effects that you regret later. Here's an example. Law enforcement agent told me the other day, if I show up in a school shooting, my job is to eliminate the threat. If somebody comes out of a classroom with a gun, they just became a target. That could be a law-abiding citizen with a concealed carry permit trying to do their, you know, take action in a school shooting. You may be shooting the wrong person. Carefully think through these things. We don't want to create more problems than we solve. Clarksville, Arkansas is now doing that. They've got a program by which they have armed educators in the classroom. It's in Johnson County outside my district, but again, I think this is one of those things that we need to push down, give as much control to the local level as we can where that jurisdiction should be.
All right. So I guess if I'm going to summarize here, you're open to a lot of different ideas that are out there in terms of gun access, gun restriction, just in terms of something holistic to address this situation. Do you think Congress will take action, though?
Hard to say. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I think when you start trying to, from the periphery, going after fundamental parts of the Second Amendment, you're on a very difficult slope there, and you got to be careful. Because then what's next? Are we going to go after the First Amendment? Are there going to be Fourth Amendment issues? So, I mean, I think you got to be really, really careful to make sure you think through all of these issues and that you are actually making a difference rather than just trying to satisfy some long-range political goal, and that is to rid the country of guns. We don't need to punish the law-abiding citizen. And there are many examples out there where the law-abiding citizen is the one that gets punished for the dastardly deeds of a very few people. And I want to be careful that we don't go there.
All right, Congressman Steve Womack, thank you.
Roby,
for
it's
your
always
time.
good to be with you.
All
Thank
right,
you so
too.
much.
Thank you.